am starting off my September Wheel of D20 reads, and I have already completed the first book I needed to for this month, which was the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins Volume 3, Issue 2. This was for the prompt of a book with 2 or more authors, because obviously with this being Critical Role, this not only has Matthew Mercer being kind of like the overall story creator of Critical Role and the campaigns involved with it, especially Vox Machina, but this also has a lot of like other authors and artists and stuff like that, so this had plenty of authors to choose from on the front cover. But I did give this a 5 out of 5 stars. Anything to do with Critical Role is going to get me like an automatic 5-star because of the fact that I love everything that comes out of this world. I love especially that Matt is somebody that is very heavily involved in everything that is ever put out about the stuff in the Critical Role world. Anything that is coming out that especially is not something that he is making himself or somebody with his team is making themselves. I love that he gets very like involved in that, and so this obviously had all the voice that I wanted for, you know, the characters. I could, again, with most of the graphic novels and comic books, hear the characters in my head as they are from what I know of the Vox Machina D&D campaign. And this in particular, though, was kind of like an interesting like filler issue, because in the issue before this that I read in August, it ended on a point where the characters were going to be getting into kind of like a big brawl of sorts, where like they were going to be going through multiple rounds of fighting for money. And this issue was basically them going through all of those fights and ultimately winning at the end of it all. It was really fun to read. It was probably something, though, that would have been much more entertaining to watch if I was able to have watched the part of the campaign that this was involved in. But it's kind of one of those things where like you're literally just watching a lot of them fight, and some funny quips here and there that are very much in tune with the characters. This is kind of one of those things where, like, when it's all bound up into Volume 3, which basically this is the 3rd series, which then would go into its own volume when all of the pieces are finalized and done. This basically would essentially be that really nice, like, filler chapter in an actual full-length volume of the graphic novel. So there's going to always be issues that are going to be like that because of the fact that most graphic novels are initially comic books that are then created into full-on volumes after so many issues, usually like 5 or 6. So really enjoyed this one. Again, 5 out of 5 stars, nothing wrong with it. Really enjoyed it. Loved the characters, loved the fighting. Grog is honestly becoming one of my more favorites. I really kind of hated the fact in the campaign that for the longest time he kind of was this really big oafish character, but I don't know, there is something very endearing about him, and seeing him in more of a cartoon format with the comic books that, like, I just think make it a little bit more fun to watch him be kind of the oaf. But I also, like, love Travis as a voice actor. I think that he, especially when playing characters in, like, Campaign 3 and comparatively into Vox Machina, he just does a really good job of really playing the character as, you know, they are. Like, he doesn't try to do anything that the character would not logically do based on their personality and the things that they do. So I just love Travis as a player because I think that he is a really good player. He knows how to play based off of his character, which I think makes me really enjoy Grog a little bit more because he is being played by a very, you know, understanding actor that basically, you know, creates him as this oafish character. And so I kind of respect Grog more just based on the fact that he's played by a very respectable player. So anyway, love this. The next book I'm going to be getting into, though, is going to be probably one that's going to take me a couple of days to get through, and it is my Gabby pick for this month, which was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This is Jennette McCurdy's memoir that came out in early August, and I have heard amazing things about it. I have heard that it's really heartbreaking and heart-wrenching for a lot of people, especially those that grew up with Jennette like I did, with being on iCarly and on Sam and Cat. I do think that there's going to probably be some points where I'm either going to be furiously angry at some of the things that she talks about in terms of like things that her mom did, because this is supposed to basically outline her entire life being a child star and dealing with a mother who was her manager and who also like kind of caused her to go through things like eating disorders and basically did everything to not be a good mother to her as opposed to being her manager. Like, she might have been a good manager, but she was not a good mom by any stretch of the imagination, and this is going to really play into a lot of that. And I think also, like, some of the things that Jennette has learned by being in Hollywood and being a child star that have, like, really impacted her today, and being probably one of the biggest reasons why she has stepped away from acting in general and doing anything involved with Hollywood, which I don't blame her. I'm glad she got out of all of it. I'm glad that she is doing much better now, because from what I understand, even before going into this memoir, it was really rough for her. She had a lot of things happen that I would not wish upon anybody, and is, I think, a testament to how damaging sometimes the movie and TV industry can be for especially young people, and especially young women, who are not only pitted up against other young women for things like similar roles or whatever the case may be, but the fact of the matter being that they are expected to fit into certain kinds of molds, especially when they're very young and they have, like, a certain temperament. They're expected to fulfill those roles, and if they don't adhere to everything that is being asked of them, and don't do the things that they are being in some ways forced to do, they will then be reprimanded for that, I guess, is the best way I can say that. So this is probably going to be one I'm going to be really upset with by the end of it, but I do think it's going to end up being, like, a 5-star, because I don't really rate memoirs anything lower than 5-star unless for some reason I feel like I don't care for the writing style. But I have heard that Jennette has a very dark humor kind of esque writing within this. I think this makes sense considering that Jennette is trying to not necessarily make light of everything that happened, but at a certain point in your life, you kind of just mask your hurt and the trauma you faced with humor. It's a very common tactic for people who are trying to protect their own feelings and make it so that, you know, they don't need to be coddled. They don't need to be treated as if they need to be, like, babied. It's something that's just very, I think, ingrained in us, because we've just all kind of learned, I think, collectively, that humor is a coping mechanism. And so we use it any chance we get, and I think that that's why it was used a lot in this, from what I understand. But I am excited to get through it, do not get me wrong. It's just probably going to be something that I'm going to have a lot of thoughts on by the time I finish it. So there might be a bit of a section here where I speak very openly about the issues that Jennette brings up and how shitty they are, to put it nicely. So yeah, anyway, that's basically it for right now. I have to still start it. I'm probably going to start it here later today. So I will speak to all you guys later when I have made some progress, and I'm glad my mom died. Good morning, guys. I'm, like, right in the sun, so I apologize, but I'm out doing some grocery shopping today. It's grocery day for me. So it's Saturday. I need to finish today I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I'm currently listening to it as I'm driving, and I should be able to finish it, I think, after all my driving today, which will be good. But I am so mad. I am so upset with all of the things that are happening. Like, because I knew going into this I was going to be pissed alone at the fact of, like, Jennette's mother being how she is, and, like, hearing all of the things that she did to her daughter. So I thought that at the very least I was going to be so mad at, obviously, Jennette's mom and everything she's doing, right? There's so many more things that I was not expecting going into this. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of talk about Dan Schneider. She calls him the creator, but we all know that it's Dan fucking Schneider, because what else is new when it comes to fucking Nickelodeon? And the pure fact that right before the book came out, Nickelodeon offered her $300,000 to not publish the book, and she denied that because she's like, I'm not letting this get away. Like, I am going to let this come out, and it's going to out him. But we already knew that he was a fucking scumbag with Amanda Bynes and everything, and
Oh, it just pisses me off so much. But then on top of that, she gets into a relationship apparently when she's 18 with a 32-year-old man that she calls Joe, and I don't quite know who that is off the top of my head because I was not even aware like who she was dating at the time. And this is around the time where Sam and Cat was starting to pick up. Like she was 18, the show had basically started and going into like production and everything. We haven't even quite got to the Ariana section yet, but I'm sure that that's going to be here real soon. And there's this whole section where she talks about how she and Joe end up going off to a resort, like in Hawaii, I think, or something like that. And paparazzi catch her and Joe out paddleboarding. And at this point, she'd gained some weight after having been anorexic for a long time. And so she was gaining, she was looking like she had gained weight. And so her mom apparently calls her multiple times, emails her multiple times, and starts calling her like basically a whore and that she's a slut because she's allowing some man to then like basically have sex with her and all these things. Meanwhile, she's not actually having sex yet, but she's doing everything she can other than that because of the fact that she's also fucking Mormon, which I never knew. Like, why is it always that every single celebrity that goes through the stupidest fucking shit that no person should have to go through is stemmed from the fact that they're Mormon? Like, okay, here's my thing. My husband's family is Mormon. Paternal grandmother, so my father-in-law's mother is Mormon. And my father-in-law is kind of Mormon. He doesn't quite necessarily adhere to all of the things under Mormonism, but he was an elder in the church for some time. I don't really interact that often with my husband's grandmother, mostly because I don't see her that often, but everything I hear about Mormonism is just how fucking toxic it is. And this is just one aspect of it because Jennette grew up with Mormonism growing up and her mother was kind of following that path of Mormonism where, no caffeine, clean eating, all these things, but she was also calorie restricting, which is basically anorexia, and forcing Jennette to do that when she's like 10 years old. And it's so fucking stupid. And on top of that, like, she preaches, to do certain things and all these other stuff, but then her own mother doesn't adhere to it half the time, and it's just so fucking frustrating. Like, I remember when this book had first come out, and people on TikTok were doing rant reviews of it purely just because of how angry they were about the things that Jennette was coming out about because of how damaging it was for her as a person. I didn't know half the shit that poor woman went through, and I am so mad on behalf of her because of the fact that that is not okay. Any of the things that she went through with regards to her mother, with Dan Schneider, with how Nickelodeon did things, that is unimaginably fucking frustrating. I cannot even believe how this woman is still standing because there are so many people in her position who would have just given up at this point. They would have given up long before her mother died. And I'm so proud of Jennette for not only persevering through all of that negativity and that bullshit, but then to come out with a fucking book about it and exposing all of the things that this poor woman went through. It makes me so happy to see that she still is now thriving and she's doing better so much more now than she could have ever done. Her mother would not even allow her to shower without her. That is how controlling this woman was. She had to shower and shave her own child by the time she was still 16, 17, 18 years old. And the only way she was able to get out of that was because her mother had to go back into chemo by the time she was 18. That's the only time she was ever able to actually take care of her own self and not be coddled. And oh my God, I'm just so mad. I'm so mad. But it is so good. Like, I'm not mad at Jennette, obviously. I am mad at the fact that her mother was just this awful fucking human being. I cannot even imagine. Oh God, I'm so mad. But anyway, with that being said, it's really good. I really love this memoir. I knew I was going to love it. But I did today end up getting my first pumpkin spice latte. And I'm so excited. I just got a venti iced one because it is way too damn hot today for a fucking hot coffee. And I still have to take my allergy pill. So I'm going to take that right now. I'm out, like I said, doing groceries today. I'm going to Costco. I have to go then over to the mall because I want to go pick up a copy of Anastasia and Ophelia After All, since I loved both of those. And I want like physical copies of them for my library. I'm also going to see if I can run by maybe Spirit Halloween if it's open at my mall, because now that it's in the beginning of September, I would not be surprised if it is open right now. But then I also have to run to Michael's because I know their Halloween stuff is out. So I'm going to go check that out. And then I also need to run by the library to drop off my library copies of Anastasia and Ophelia After All, so that those are taken care of. And then the last thing is I have to actually go get my other groceries. So I have to just basically grab a couple of things here that I'd like to grab in bulk, and we're going to kind of go from there. So yeah, that's how my reading's been going so far. I'm so mad at everything that's happened, and so like, oh, it's frustrating, but figured I would come in for this vlog and check in with you guys because it's been a minute. I think I've got still like an hour and 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half of the audiobook left, because I've been listening to the audiobook as I've been driving and everything, so I don't have much of it left. So I think, like I said today, by the end of the day with all my driving around and stuff, I should be close to finishing. I'm also going to try to listen while I'm inside with my headphones and stuff like that, so I should get more time in. But yeah, that's kind of the plan for today. And otherwise, I will let you guys know when I finish it and then get started with the next Wheel of D20 book.
Hi all, so I'm finally back home. I'm gonna be able to finally update you guys for this vlog. So I've been out and about, and then I got home around 3. My in-laws brought over their youngest puppy that was gonna stay with us for the night, and it's been chaotic because then I've been filming and everything, and so now I'm finally done. On my drive, I did finish I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This was for the Gabby pick for the Wheel of D20, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Not a surprise. I don't really tend to rate memoirs lower than that unless the writing style is not something I'm jiving with, but I really loved this. I feel still so angry and heartbroken at the same time about this because of the fact that, like, this is a hard thing to get through, especially if you are a fan of Jennette's. Just to hear about all the stuff that her mom did to her, like I was talking about earlier, it was awful. And then the story is split up where about half of it is before her mom passes away, and then the other part is after. And the after effects are just about as bad as some of the things that she dealt with before her mom died. Because everything that she had been dealing with mental illness-wise while her mom was still alive was really compounded by a lot of the guilt and a lot of the fear she had of not having her mom around. But I do appreciate and love the fact that with this book, and in particular, with writing it, with creating it, Jennette was able to finally start, I think, truly healing, because she realized that a lot of the pain she had suffered was at the hands of her mother and how abusive her mother really was to her. She talked about how when she went into therapy, she really started to understand the problems she had with her mother, especially after she died. And the things that she had kind of let simmer below the surface for so many years, and finally when it started to come out, how scary it was. There's a lot of trigger warnings, obviously, within this book by itself, but it's hard. It is hard to not feel sympathy and want to hug Jennette, even though that's probably the furthest thing she wants people to do to her is to hug her. Because one of the things is that if you've grown up with her like I have, you saw her as an idol. You saw her as somebody that could do no wrong, that was having the best life that there was, being a star. But this is one of those memoirs that I think really exemplifies how awful it can be for a lot of people that are in the spotlight, especially those that are child stars, and how they grow up in incredibly abusive environments because they're taken advantage of because they're so young. And I feel like that this just really highlights a lot of the things that need to be addressed in terms of things that go on in Hollywood. And I hope that with this book, more people who were affected by people like Dan Schneider, for one example, get the help and the justice that they deserve. Because he messed up a lot of young girls. Not just Jennette, not just Amanda, but multiple. And it's disgusting. So I hope that with her coming out about this and her denying the $300,000 that they offered her to not talk about what Dan had done, I hope that it encourages more young women like Jennette, who have been abused by him, to come forward if they feel comfortable to. And if they don't feel comfortable to, that's okay, because you can't force people to come out about something that they either don't recognize has happened or they're not comfortable with sharing because it could affect their lives in some capacity. So, I feel that this is going to make some major waves. It's already made major waves since its release, but I feel like that this is one of those stories where it's going to start the conversation and the investigation into other men like Dan Schneider and other people like Jennette's mother who abused their children and abused their right as authority figures. It's something that I think is gonna have to happen. Because if it doesn't, there's gonna be a lot of very angry people coming at them. But the next book I will be going into for Wheel of D20 is Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. This is going to be for the prompt of Adaptation, because this is the sequel adaptation to the movie of Nightmare Before Christmas. This is following Sally's point of view. I guess from the synopsis, it's going to be essentially dictating the story of how she doesn't want to be the Pumpkin Queen anymore, and how she kind of goes on her own journey like Jack did, where she falls through a door and ends up in a new world, and it causes all kinds of things to happen and choices to be made that are probably not for the best. So I think this is going to be really fun. I hope it lives up to what I remember of The Nightmare Before Christmas, but I guess we'll have to see, because sequels like this don't always go very well, but I have high hopes, especially because I like Shea Ernshaw's writing a lot. So anyway, I'm going to head out and I'll update you guys once I get through some of this. Hey guys, so it is now 11:22 at night. I am currently in sprints and we're doing our last sprint, but I wanted to update you guys on Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. I've met my reading goal for today, so I'm now almost about a third of the way through this. I'm on page 105, and the book itself is like 311 pages. So far this is actually going really well. I really appreciate with this one how it does feel like it's from the world of Nightmare Before Christmas. It is very obvious when you read into this that Shea Ernshaw must have been a huge fan of the movie themselves, because this does feel very much how I would imagine Sally as a narrator to feel. The mannerisms are the same, the voice sounds very similar, and I think too that the overall plot does actually work really well with the fact that Sally never really liked the idea in the movie to be kind of isolated. She hated the fact that she was being held basically prisoner by her creator and never allowed to go outside, and so having to love Jack from afar kind of thing was a really hard thing for her. And now that she's become queen, the synopsis reads that basically she starts to feel again stifled, and she searches for something to make her feel like she can, you know, stay happy. And then from there, the conflict arises where something bad happens that then causes her to have to fix everything. And by the time you get a third of the way through this, you know what's happened. And the villain they bring in is actually really interesting. It's a character from a world that we don't really know much about, because if you know anything about Nightmare Before Christmas, there are portals, doors, if you will, to various other seasons. The whole point of Nightmare Before Christmas is that Jack leaves Halloween Town and accidentally falls into Christmas Town. And that's what sparks the whole thing with that one. This, it's not right now determined if it's a particular town, but there's something sinister going on. Essentially, Sally is the only one who can save all of Halloween Town. And I'm very excited to see how that goes. But about a third of the way in, so far really good, really cute, like I said. Very much feels similar to The Nightmare Before Christmas. So at this point, I would say if you're a fan of Nightmare Before Christmas, to definitely pick this up. But I still have to get through the other 2/3 of it, so we'll see how my thoughts fare out from there. So I just wanted to do a quick update on that. But it's really fun. It's cute. I'm very excited for that. But I'll be picking that up more tomorrow and then finishing it up on Monday during my day off from work because of Labor Day, which is very exciting. So I'm going to go for right now, and I will talk to all you guys when I make more progress in it. Hey guys, so I wanted to update you real quick because today on Monday, September 5th, it's about 10 to 4 in the afternoon, I just finished Long Live the Pumpkin Queen for the prompt of an adaptation for the Wheel of D20, so I am now down to my final prompt for the month already at the very beginning of the month, and I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I liked the last bit of it, but I do feel like the last 60 pages was a little slow, and I wasn't as engaged with it as I had been for the rest of the book, and so I do think that that played into my overall rating, and it was really sweet and cute, but I just couldn't also fully give it a 5-star, even if I had been engaged the last 60 pages. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't quite give it that 5-star rating. It just was very fun, very sweet, and definitely I think was the best adaptation sequel I could have asked for when it came to The Nightmare Before Christmas, but I just felt like for some reason I couldn't quite 100% give it that 5-star that I was wanting to, but very fun. I really am glad I did end up reading this, and I'm very happy that this turned out as good as it did because I was very worried with it being an adaptation of a well-beloved movie. It wasn't going to be done correctly, and there was going to be things that didn't make sense, but in all honesty, there were some twists in here that I was really surprised by because they made sense. Like, they were things that were expanded upon that we really didn't hear much of or really touch on in Nightmare Before Christmas because the story was mostly focused on Jack as a character, whereas this focuses on Sally and a lot of the things surrounding her character and like how she experiences life more so here than in the movie. So really appreciated that. I really felt like this stayed true to the story and stayed true to the original content that there was within Nightmare Before Christmas. So I highly recommend it for anybody who's looking for a very fast, fun read leading up to Halloween because it definitely had those very cute autumn vibes. But again, for fans of Nightmare Before Christmas, I think you're all going to be pretty happy with how this one turned out because from what I understand, the Hocus Pocus sequel did not live up to what a lot of people had expected, the book at least, because the movie doesn't come out till the end of this month. But the Hocus Pocus sequel book was not as good, apparently. But for the final prompt of the Wheel of D20 is my recently purchased prompt, and for that I have The Daughter of Doctor Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is a kind of retelling, and again, almost an expansion on the story of H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, which, if you don't know, was a story that basically indicated the fact that there was a man who washed up onto this island that this man, Dr. Moreau, had taken over, and he was doing human experiments by basically combining humans with various animals to see how they would end up living, if they could live. All of the experimented animals / humans ended up creating their own society and were looking to then overthrow Dr. Moreau, and our main character in that story is kind of just watching all this stuff happen. Now, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau is placed in Mexico in the 19th century, and it is following more particularly the daughter of the doctor. I'm going to read through the synopsis because I feel like not many people have talked about what this is supposed to go into, but I will discuss it with you guys here. So first we have Carlotta Moreau, who is the daughter, a young woman growing up on a remote and luxuriant estate safe from the conflict and strife of the Yucatan Peninsula, the only daughter of a researcher who is either a genius or a madman. Montgomery Lawton, a melancholic overseer with a tragic past and a propensity for alcohol, an outcast who assists Dr. Moreau with his experiments, which are financed by the Lizaldis, owners of magnificent haciendas and plentiful coffers. I'm guessing this is the character that would be reminiscent of the man who washes up to the island in the original. Then we have the hybrids, the fruits of the doctor's labor, destined to blindly obey their creator and remain in the shadows. All of them live in a perfectly balanced and static world, which is jolted by the abrupt arrival of Eduardo Lizaldi, the charming and careless son of Dr. Moreau's patron, who will unwittingly begin a dangerous chain reaction. For Moreau keeps secrets, Carlotta has questions, and in the sweltering heat of the jungle, passions may ignite. The Daughter of Doctor Moreau is both a dazzling historical novel and a daring science fiction journey. So definitely plays on the actual like core of what looks like to be the island of Dr. Moreau, but obviously has taken some liberties and is going into a little bit different directions here and there depending on particularly the effect of the daughter being involved and this being kind of more of a established society as opposed to being on a remote island kind of thing. Very excited to see how this one goes. I think that this is going to be really interesting. I've heard that from a lot of people that Silvia is a very well-liked author, that she is somebody that a lot of people find to be very fun to read, like has a lot of like horror elements involved in it, but obviously like this synopsis said is very much a historical novel. But I think this is going to be interesting. This will be the first book I've read by her, so I will hopefully get a good idea of if I like her writing style, because I also have Mexican Gothic and I believe Untamed Shores. I might have Gods of Jade and Shadow, but I don't remember. But at the very least, this will help me understand if I like her writing style, because this is her newest release, and this is also one of my most anticipated reads for the year 2022, so I'll be knocking off another book off that list, which will be very exciting. I think I'll wait until later to read that, though, because I honestly today have felt very crummy. I think I might go take a nap and try to feel better a little bit later, because I just don't really have the brain capacity, I think, to read something right now. Like, my eyes are super heavy, they hurt, and I just feel like I need to go take a nap. So I will let you guys know, though, when I've made some progress in this, what I think about it. Hey guys, so I wanted to quickly update you guys on how the Daughter of Dr. Moreau is going. Oscar apparently is going to be very sassy with me because he just woke up from a nap. But I'm on page 120 of this. I am, what chapter am I on? Chapter 12. So I will say now, probably getting close to like 40%, almost halfway through. I am liking this a lot. I do really like the way that this story has kind of extended and expanded on the original story of the island of Dr. Moreau. It hasn't really like got much of a plot going on as of yet. We're more so following the characters in this kind of, I guess maybe scenario that you probably could consider as part of the plot. But the synopsis talks about how we obviously have Carlotta, who is the daughter of Dr. Moreau. We find out that she's actually half French, half Mexican of some kind. Basically, her father, the Dr. Moreau that we know of, is from France, and he originally had a wife and daughter who had died in sickness, and he had then basically had a relationship with a random woman. We don't know who she is, we don't know where she's from or where she's gone, but basically she had left him their daughter, who is Carlotta. And essentially we learned that in the very beginning, Carlotta was very, very sick as a young girl, would get sick very often. And the first part starts up where she's about 14 years old, and we see Montgomery, who is our second character, who we also get a perspective from, comes in and he's interviewing for the job that Dr. Moreau is looking to fill, which essentially is kind of a second hand in terms of taking care of the hybrids on the island that we are very well aware of, considering this is a Dr. Moreau retelling. And essentially he is going to help out with taking care of the landscape. He kind of is helping to organize things so that they can have a proper civilization of sorts for the hybrids and then grow crops and stuff in this area that they live in. There's an incident that Carlotta gets into with a couple of the hybrids who are kind of the prized possessions of Moreau. They are the best maintained hybrids he has created, where they accidentally set loose a hybrid, and then we don't know what else happens from there. But basically it's just kind of a random incident where Montgomery then kind of realizes, like, this is what I want to do. And in the second part we learn that it's about 6 years later. Carlotta is a 20-year-old woman as of now. Montgomery, when he came into this area, was 29. He's now 35, and we're learning a lot more about exactly the relationship between Montgomery and Carlotta as the years have gone on. They have a very tumultuous kind of relationship. It's very much kind of an older brother, little sister kind of thing, where there's a bit of a rivalry. They bicker a lot. They don't seem to get along too well. And Carlotta has obviously dealt with a lot of things over time. She has been given more responsibility to help with the hybrids with her father, helping take care of them. And you also learn that partially in the first part of the story, that Carlotta actually technically has hybrid aspects about her, where in the sense that because she was very sick, her father had developed this antidote for her sickness that required her to have a certain creature, like venom of some kind, placed into her body, injected, and it caused her to be healthy. And so you learn that like that's continued over time, and she is really helping with keeping the hybrids in gear. Now, what happens, though, is that is brought up in the synopsis, is that the son of the man who is the benefactor of the Moreau complex, basically, his son comes over and is looking to check out the place. He wants to kind of be more involved in what his dad is doing, and they meet Carlotta, and Dr. Moreau decides it might be the best idea for Carlotta to maybe possibly be married off to Eduardo, because of the fact that Dr. Moreau is having financial issues. The benefactor is not really impressed in how things have gone over the last 6 years, because basically Moreau has not been able to replicate what he did with Lupe and Chachito, who are the two best hybrids that he was able to come out with, that are the strongest, that are the most long lasting. And so the benefactor is kind of like holding funds because of the fact that he's not seeing the results that Dr. Moreau had promised him. And so Dr. Moreau thinks that by marrying Carlotta to Eduardo, maybe that'll keep a constant flow of money coming in, because they are now family. So Carlotta plays kind of the dutiful daughter of, you know, catering to Eduardo, and she does kind of have a thing for him in a sense. She finds him very attractive, but we learn that Montgomery is very protective over Carlotta. Not that she is just his charge per se, he actually is partially supposed to protect her for Dr. Moreau, but I kind of get the feeling that there is more romantic aspects involved with that he's a little jealous of Eduardo, and a little jealous of the fact that Carlotta does not give him the same attention as she does Eduardo. And keeping in mind there's a 15-year gap between Carlotta and Montgomery, it's not uncommon in this time period for that to be a thing, where the relationships between men and women were very large in terms of the age gap, and it was very common for older men to marry very young women, especially when they turned of age. And this kind of feels like it's headed in that direction, where we're going to probably see Montgomery get involved with Carlotta. There might be feelings brought up, but you also learn that Montgomery has a very, very hard past. You learn a lot about exactly how he got to where he is, and it's very sad. It's very heartbreaking, and it's really interesting to read about. But then, like, part of it is you see Carlotta where she's unable to figure out what it is she wants, whether she wants to play the dutiful daughter, or if she does want to, you know, do things on her own. She thinks that she has the capability of living on her own in a sense, even though she doesn't want to. But she also is like, you know, it might be good to placate to Eduardo's advances, because it will help her father in the long run. But she is then worried about ultimately having to leave her father when her father is like the most important person in her life. So I am really liking it. I do like kind of the exploration that's being brought up in here, where it's not so much about the hybrids as it is really like the things surrounding around Carlotta. But there was a very damning scene that kind of came up where a pretty big incident happens, and I'm going to be curious to see how the ramifications of that play out, because basically Eduardo was attacked by one of the hybrids on the island, and they don't know about the hybrids. It basically is just like a sanatorium at this point. They don't know that he is doing the work with the hybrids. The only person that does is Eduardo's father, and it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out, because there's also this religious aspect being played into the story, because Eduardo has, I think it's his cousin with him, Isidro, and Isidro is not a fan of the way that religion is being kind of moved away from, I guess, to a certain extent, because the way that it's talked about in this area of the world is that Christianity is not adhered to as well as many people would expect it to be. Like, it's kind of one of those things where, because it's not what he deems as Christian, it's therefore pagan kind of thing. So, like, he has his own ideas about how Christianity should be. And he was originally, I guess, looking to be a priest of some kind. And so, like, he has very opinionated things about the world. And so I think that this could possibly run the Moreau family into some trouble with the fact that Eduardo was attacked. The only thing I will say is I don't care for the fact that when we jump from perspective to perspective, especially when we are looking at similar scenes, like basically what will happen is you'll have one perspective where a scene will play out, and then you go to the other person's perspective, jumping between Carlotta and Montgomery, and you will see that entire scene play out again through their perspective, which normally I would find okay, like it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but I think that it kind of just bogs down the story a little bit, where we have to completely go back in time to then catch ourselves back up and see what that character felt. It would make sense if, like, we didn't have each chapter separated from each character, and if, like, for instance, the chapter itself, there were sections that were, like, divvied up per person, you would see in, like, a linear fashion the thoughts and the perspective of those characters play out for that one scene, and only seeing it the one time. I think that's my biggest gripe with this so far, and I will say the writing style took me a little bit to get into. I feel like I'm really trucking through it right now, but it took me a little bit really to kind of get used to the writing, because it's got that very, I don't know if I would say mature is the right word, but that very kind of older style of writing where, like, it feels like it's supposed to be back in the 19th century, if that makes sense. Like, it's obviously written to where you can understand it, but it's got a writing style that makes it very atmospheric and very much placed in the 19th century, as opposed to it having more of a modern writing style and therefore making it feel more modern, which is definitely something I would hope for with a story that's historical. But I will say that that writing style takes a little bit to get used to, because it's not something that I think you would expect off the bat, and it gets a little bit confusing at times, but the further on you go, the easier it does get, I will say. So that's some of my initial thoughts on it. I'm on, like I said, chapter 12. It's 304 pages, so I have like 184 pages, I think, left of this. So I'm not going to be finishing it today, but my reading goal is to get to page 219 today, which I have less than 100 pages left to get to, so I can probably get this done today, and then kind of hopefully move on to something else. But this will be done tomorrow so that I can then focus on other things. But I will give you guys my final thoughts on this when I finish it tomorrow, so that we can finally end off this vlog and be done with the Wheel of D20 reads for the month. But at the very least, even if I DNF it at this point, I will have completed the Wheel of D20 for September, and it's only September 6th. And September 7th, technically, is when I'll be done. So, very exciting. I feel like I made the best decision with putting all of my Wheel of D20 books at the very beginning of the month, because it makes it so much easier for me to get through these a lot quicker. So, that is it for right now, but I will talk to all you guys tomorrow with my final thoughts on the Daughter of Doctor Moreau, and whether or not I think I'll be reading more of Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing. Hey guys, so I have to film on my phone because my camera batteries, for some reason, just have not really charged. Sometimes they sit kind of funny, I think, in my charger, and so they don't fully charge. It's weird. Anyway, I did want to come on to talk about the fact that last night I did finally finish my last Wheel of D20 prompt for the month of September. So yay, Wheel of D20 is already done. We're 8 days into the month, and I have completed all 4 of my prompts, which is very exciting. This was to complete the recently purchased prompt, which was a prompt I had received from Esme's Game of the Books that I had to play for the final prompt for the Wheel of D20, if you watched my September TBR video. But I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I've kind of talked a little bit about it here and there. I talked a little bit about it in my weekly vlogs that I had going on, but let's go into some kind of more in-depth thoughts about this, because I have a lot. So first and foremost, I really enjoyed this a lot. I think that this was a very well done adaptation of the story of the Island of Dr. Moreau. I think that what Silvia had done to expand on the story and then therefore create new twists involving with it was really well done. A lot of the things that were brought up in this, especially in regards to Carlotta being the daughter of the doctor, was really well done. I think it made sense. I think that in the context of the scenario, if things had gone the way that it did, you know, in the original, it probably would have ended up almost the same way. Now, the big difference, like I said, between this and the original is the fact that we have a daughter involved in the story. In the original,
Island of Dr. Moreau story by H.G. Wells, there was no daughter, there was nothing of the kind. The story was basically about a man who washed up onto this island, found out that the doctor was doing these things with animals and humans, and the guy kind of was helping him out, and then there was kind of this big brouhaha that then led to like a lot of deaths. That's kind of in a nutshell what happens in the Island of Dr. Moreau. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, however, has things go a lot differently because, for one, we have a character who, being the main character of the story, Carlotta, has her own things going on. She's the daughter of this doctor who is, hell-bent on getting this research, exemplified and looked at. And at the same time, Carlotta is 20 years old. She's getting to the point where she could probably start taking over things. Her father's health is failing, and she feels this kind of sense of duty to help take over what there is, and especially take over the household because of the fact that the benefactor that has been paying the doctor to do his research is starting to pull funds from them. And I mentioned before how Carlotta has to basically make the decision of whether or not she wants to be involved with the benefactor's son, because she thinks that by marrying him, she will then gain some monetary advancement toward the research, and then there will be a constant flow of money to her father. But at the same time, she's somebody who is very loyal to her father. And so there's this kind of loyalty issue that she has because she wants to be there to help her father and protect him and, help him do his research. But at the same time, he doesn't really treat her that well. You see over the course of the story that he treats her as if she's kind of a second-class citizen of sorts, whether that's to protect her or whatever the case may be. He treats her poorly in some instances. So I would say that there's a little bit of a trigger warning for maybe, I wouldn't say necessarily mental abuse, but definitely some like very harsh words and like being put down and things of that nature for being a woman. Because remember, this is the time period where women were not really looked at as caregivers. They weren't looked at as being doctors. It was very rare for a woman, other than obviously in like a battle scenario, to tend to the wounded, tend to any kind of creature. It was more men who dominated the medical field and anything to do with science. And so there's a lot of times where Carlotta is put down by her own father for not being smart enough, for not being capable of handling certain things when she is actually capable and she knows it. There is this kind of romantic plot line of a sorts. It's not fully developed, and I appreciate that with her and Montgomery, who is our other perspective. In the beginning of the story, we learn Montgomery comes to the place where Dr. Moreau lives in looking for work, and Dr. Moreau hires him to basically help out with taking care of the land and helping the hybrids and all of that kind of stuff. And you learn over the course of the second part of this story, where that's basically the majority of the story, when Carlotta has turned 20, she's, a fully grown woman, that Montgomery has had kind of a thing for her for a while. And mind you, he's 15 years her senior, which back in the 19th century was not uncommon. It was very common for men much older than women to, court, to then marry them in some capacity. But I think for a lot of people, it might seem icky because of the fact that it is not something that is done at all anymore, or it's not as often. And a lot of people would maybe worry about things like grooming and stuff like that. And I don't think that in this story there's any grooming involved with Montgomery. He is very respectful of Carlotta. If anything, throughout most of the story, he tries to put her like at arm's distance because of the fact that, for one, Montgomery has had a lot of mental trauma over the course of his life. You learn that this man has been through the ringer, and he doesn't really trust a lot of people. And he doesn't trust himself in terms of getting himself involved with anybody. So you do see that he battles with this thing about whether or not he should become involved with Carlotta, and whether or not he should be more than like that older brother figure, protector of sorts. Because the dynamic that they have does feel very sibling-like. And he, I think at this point in his life, just is looking for somebody who is going to love him for who he is, and he thinks that Carlotta is that, but that's also because he spent 6 years of her life with her, and he understands how kind she is, and so he kind of becomes infatuated with her. But what I will say with that is I really do appreciate what Silvia had done ultimately by the end of this with the two of them. It doesn't end really in a way I would have expected for this to go, and I think that it actually was for the best. I feel like that the way she just did this was very logical, and honestly was very refreshing because of the fact that I feel that anytime there is any kind of romantic involvement in a story, authors will just immediately go to they get together, they live happily ever after, and that's not always the case. I will say this story does kind of leave on an open ending because of the fact that like it's kind of that riding off into the distance kind of an ending, which I again appreciate because I don't feel like we absolutely need to know what ultimately ends up happening to Carlotta. The main story of it having been what goes on with her family home and with her father, that was the story. That was what we were learning about. So anything else past that was not really 100% necessary. The epilogue was very helpful. I do think that that was absolutely needed, but really enjoyed this a lot. I do feel like this is something that a lot of people would definitely enjoy. It's got kind of that gothic horror vibes in some capacity. It definitely plays on the island of Dr. Moreau very well, but also expands on and changes up some things in terms of the overall fighting and death that ends at the very end of this compared to what happens in the island of Dr. Moreau. But really well done. I do think the only things I was still hung up on are the writing style was a little bit difficult to get into at first. This is also my first Silvia Moreno-Garcia, so I don't know if this is a typical writing style of hers. I just know that at the very beginning of this, I was a little like, ooh, this is a little much for, a very, simplistic kind of story. I was expecting more of a simplistic writing, and I didn't get that, and so it took me a little bit more time to get into. And on top of it, I do feel like that in general, Carlotta did not really need any romance at all. There is one relationship she gets into, and it's very quick and very intense. And while like that by itself, like the logic of it being a quick and very intense relationship, that makes sense. I do think that Carlotta at the end of the day should never have had any kind of romance. That is a very picky thing for me personally, because with her temperament and the way that she kind of acts in the story, it's more of her loyalty to her father that takes the forefront of everything. And so it would make more sense for me to then have her have like no romantic feelings, be almost kind of like an aromantic kind of person, because she's not focused on a relationship. She doesn't want to ever leave this area that she's grown up in. If anything, one of the characters we learned, one of the hybrids, Lupe, she's the one that wants to go and travel. She wants to go and see the world, whereas Carlotta's like, yeah, no, I want to stay here. This is my home. I don't want to have to end up moving. And she puts up a big fuss when the person she gets involved with wants her to move away from home and not take care of her father and help him. So it doesn't make sense for me personally for her to ever have any romantic involvement at all. I think that it was kind of unnecessary, but I do, again, understand the complexity that there was involved with that relationship, and then also the fact of Montgomery, whatever he was dealing with, like it all tied together in the end, but I really don't think it was 100% necessary. So that's kind of the only things I had really issues with, but overall, I would highly recommend this, especially if you're a historical fiction fan, and especially if you're looking for a more modern adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau, and something that is a little bit more interesting, because I think The Island of Dr. Moreau was good, but it definitely is older, and this is a little bit more entertaining, I think, than that one. But really enjoyed this one. Very happy I ended up reading it, and like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. But that is going to conclude the Wheel of D20 vlog for this month. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys read any of these books down in the comments below, what you thought about them. I have already, by this point, done the wheel spins for October's Wheel of D20, and at this point, all I will say is that I'm a little shocked at how the wheel turned out for me. I wasn't expecting things to go the way they did, but I'm excited to see how it goes, because if I got through these things this month in 8 days, I think I'm pretty much good for October, and we'll have a very nice reward for November. That's all I will say. You'll have to check out my October TBR video for that when that comes out later this month. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below to subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. Oscar says goodbye, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.